Lead Well, Live Whole, the podcast where leadership meets life. Your host, Michael Sirmon, is here to help you rise above the noise, lead with purpose, and live with clarity. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to Lead Well, Live Whole. I'm your host, Michael Sirmon, and today I'm joined by a remarkable leader whose career has been marked by strategy, service, and a deep commitment to values. Molly Determan is the president of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council, where she's helping shape the future of the energy industry by championing workforce development, innovation, and leadership grounded in values. Over the past 12 years with the council, Molly has served in key roles including Chief Operating Officer, Vice President of Strategy and Programs, and Vice President of Communication and Marketing, bringing her experience in strategic planning, brand development, and organizational growth to every level of leadership. Before joining the council, Molly built her expertise in public relations and marketing through consulting with nonprofits, small businesses, and energy organizations, and earlier is the director of PR and marketing for the Girl Scouts of Southern Alabama, where she earned national recognition for her work. In today's conversation, we're diving into Molly's favorite themes, values-driven leadership. We'll explore how values shape workforce development, provide accountability, and serve as a compass during seasons of change. This one will give you a lot to reflect on as you consider how your own values show up in your leadership. Molly, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, I know you, right? We've known each other for several years, and we've talked a few times. And I think most of the people who listen to the podcast regularly know you as well. But would you mind sharing a little bit about your leadership journey? All right. How do you find yourself leading at the Workforce and Technology Council?
I'd be happy to. It's been, a windy, twisty path that got me here. Certainly didn't grow up like a lot of people with oil field in my background. It was not an industry that I was familiar with in any way, because I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and my mom was a math teacher, and my dad was an artist and also a business owner. And so this was just not an industry that I was aware of at all.
Right.
And so, I think my background, was I was a strong communicator.
Right.
I've always been a strong communicator and a good writer. And so went off to college to study journalism.
Right.
Added in German, and because why not? And and then when I went out into the working world, my first job wasn't at the Girl Scouts, but that was my first job in PR. And I really flourished there because it was working for, a member-driven, service-driven organization. Right. And in my house growing up, giving back to your community was something that was always a priority. No matter what was going on, we were always encouraged to get involved in our community and find ways to give back. So, so that kind of met that need. And then from there, when I left there, I was doing PR consulting, and then from there, I started doing some consulting for oil field services.
Okay.
And that's where I learned about oil field services, and I was like, this is a really cool industry. Moved to Houston, and the opportunity at the association, they needed a PR person. And so that was just the perfect mix of, working for a member-driven organization in an industry that I had begun to learn about. And so, and then once I got here, then I just kind of kept taking on a little bit more,
right,
all the areas, and so to get it to where I am today.
Okay, so that's actually a pretty good story, and it ties in with comments made during the last couple taping sessions that I've had,
Okay.
that a lot of people, most people, aren't where they are intentionally.
Yeah.
Right. We're there through opportunity. We're there through being present.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes back to, right, one of my favorite things out of the Bible says that your gifts and callings open doors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you show up, you're present, you're the solution to the problems. You've got a great attitude and you care.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Dave Trebekowski, in one of his, he talked about mindfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're mindful, you're fully present, and you're engaged, and then those opportunities begin to open up. And so German, I might have to come back to that one at some point, maybe off the podcast. But that's interesting. A little side little conversation.
It's more interesting.
Okay. But so you started journalism. What was your original plan for your life?
That's a great question. So, like I said, I'm a writer. And so one of the ways that I process my thoughts, emotions, feelings, plans, all of that is by writing. Okay. And that's something that actually my grandmother really encouraged me from a young age. She was like, I really want you to like take time to write every day. Right. And she would like follow up and pester me about it. She'd be like, have you written today? I'm like, guess I will now.
Yeah.
Anyway. And as it turned out, that was very helpful. But when I was a senior in high school,
right,
and I was like looking to like, I'm about to start my life.
Right.
Like,
oh yeah.
I'm gonna go out into the world, and so I wrote down a timeline for myself, and I wrote down like where I saw myself going, and from like graduating high school till the end and retirement and everything, and like, and so it is not at all. I have not followed it at all. But what I saw like, how often does that align what you see for yourself at 17, 18?
That's true.
But what I saw for myself is like, and at that point, I already knew I was going to get a journalism degree. And so I thought that I would go out into the world and become like a broadcast, a TV reporter to anchor. Right. And ultimately, I found myself living in first Atlanta, then New York City. And I'd never been there, but anchoring the NBC nightly news. Okay. And also having a side hustle as being a Rockette because they were in the same building.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To me, that made sense.
So were you going to work with Dan Rather or replace Dan Rather?
I didn't go that far.
You didn't go that far? Okay.
Yeah, but I also wrote along with Jeff
really?
What card I would have. Right. Because I did align like, as I have these bigger jobs, I'll be able to get nicer cars.
Well, you would. That's normal. Right. That's thorough.
It was thorough. I was also going to have 2 children. I have 1. Right. And
one's got a big personality, right?
Right. It's true. Yeah. She does. Yeah. And then I was going to retire and have a farm called Barkingham Palace.
Sparkingham?
Barkingham.
Okay. I like that.
And I was going to have every breed of dog that I've ever been interested in. And I would also have like ranch hands to like take care of them. And
dog wranglers.
What?
Dog wranglers.
Dog wranglers, yes.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that could still happen.
It could.
And so I told my husband, I'm like, this is my retirement plan.
Right. Yeah. So I taped a session yesterday evening with the bull riding ninja. I was telling you about him.
Yes.
51 years old. He is the oldest PBR bull rider.
Wow.
Right. The card carrying bull rider. And he still consistently finishes in the finals. I mean, he's really good, right? He all this stuff that he's done. He was a I think he was an athlete, gymnast for University of Oklahoma, and then he was alternate for the Olympic team, and then he fought MMA. He has black belts in multiple different disciplines, and he's just recently started a band, and he's competed on American Ninja Warrior and all this stuff, and I'm like. So his name's Vin Johns, and we know him as the bull riding ninja, right? I'm like, Vin. So what would you tell people about starting right later in life when the things you want to do when you're younger, now jumping in and doing them now, and right? So it's in line with what you're talking about. It's not too late. And I thought it was interesting. He said if you're not doing something in it now, you're not going to do something in it then. Right. You can't, he says he gets calls from 50 and 60-year-old people all the time saying, hey, I want to start riding bulls. He said, well, what have you been doing now? Well, I sat on TV and watched the rodeo. Well, you're never going to ride a bull. Right. You've got to start at some point. And if you do get on one, you're going to get killed because you're not doing those things that you're supposed to be doing to prep yourself for it and stay flexible and all that. And the dog wrangling is not as trying as that, but based off the lady I see that walks 2 or 3 dogs past my house every day, and they drag her everywhere, so it could be probably more dangerous than we think.
It would be. That's why I'm going to hire some professionals.
There we go.
But I think the idea is that I want to have been successful enough that I can do in retirement the things that bring joy, and so that's still the track I'm on.
Yeah. No, that's the way to do it. And that is the way to do it. So Rob, talking to him yesterday, or this week on this week's podcast, his degree was in marketing and he ended up in HR.
Okay.
And I had when I ran the Ingersoll Rand plant in Springfield, Missouri, MD Kenny, our quality manager, her degree was in digital design. So then she went. There's so a lot of people go to college and get their degree thinking I'm going to do this, right? And even like you actually going to the nth degree, mapping your path out, which I think is hilarious, by the way. Because I think bigger picture, or broader brush than that. My wife, we're about to take off for a month. We're going to jump in the car and we're just driving for a month around the country. And so she has these detailed plans and notes of what we're going to do and when we're going to do it and what we're going to take and how we're going to do all that. And she said, okay, well, let's compare our plans. What's your plan? My plan is get in the car and drive, right? So
yes.
I know basically. Yeah, I know where we're going, right? I assume we're going to take care of stuff on the way.
Yeah.
Right. And she's like, okay, but what kind of things are you doing? I said, well, in Kemmerer, Wyoming, there is a fossil quarry I want to stop at. In Twin Falls, Idaho, there's American Falls. I want to stop at it. And then there are 7 sea glass beaches coming down the coast of Oregon. I want to stop at all those.
Oh.
Yeah, but there's got to be more than that. Well, there is, and it'll work out, right? So it'll
show up, and you'll find the adventure in between.
It will, right? So she and I actually do another podcast, and it's called Every Mile with You. And we've been married 38 years, and it's really about the journey. And this week's episode was called Every Mile Matters, and it's about the on your headstone you have your dates and the dash in between. It's about the dash. That's where life happens. And even if you're going to, if we're going to take a 4-hour trip somewhere just to do something, the fun is what happens in between there.
Mm-hmm.
Right, the barbecue places you find or the beaches you run into and all of that you can't plan for that.
Right.
So if you overplan, you can lose out on some of your stuff. So So like you, I write every day as well, right? So I have on my website, michaelsirmon.com. I have I write a daily blog. It's drafted toward writers. And then I also write a devotional for my Facebook, and then I write a leadership post or blog for LinkedIn. So that's the first thing I do every morning. And it's a challenge for me to keep them separated, right? Because if you're not careful, it all kind of blends together, and I want them to have different, distinct voices.
Yeah.
And so with you, you've got your finger on a lot of different things, right, through the workforce. How do you keep them separate? Because it's not just one big homogenous thing you throw out there. There's very distinct voices in different sections of it, and you do a real good job of balancing those. Is that just part of your natural part of who you are, or is it something that you've learned?
Well, I think that we have 3 different focus areas that we've had for a long time, and so it helps to have a really clear like high level mission and vision and all of those things that keep you kind of within your lane. But then like knowing that anything that we do has to fall into one of those 3 areas.
Right.
Or it doesn't make sense for us as an organization. You can't do just everything that comes across our way.
Right.
And so I think that's how I have continued to stay true, but also like keep things within their own unique areas.
Right. So is it so regimented that it loses your flair, or do you still get to add some of Molly into each of it so that your personality comes through?
I think that it's not so regimented, but typically, and I think this is one of the reasons why like I'm talking about like what we're doing at the association, that everything has to come back to what is best for the sector and what is best for the members.
Yeah.
And so like my personal take on things kind of comes through, but it's driven by external forces.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think that keeps the people within the association and keeps the members that we represent like aligned and feeling like that their voice is heard and that they're represented. Because certainly I think it would be easy to like do what I think is best, but I have to always come from that perspective.
Yeah. So that's what I've told leaders for years, and I really try to live by is you set your vision, right? You have your overarching vision, and then you'll have goals associated with that, and then you'll have here you have 3 sectors. Each sector will have its own vision that ties into the main one, and then every decision you make, everything you decide to do, or every conversation you have, points to that vision, or you don't do it.
Correct.
But within it, even in creating the vision, even though I know it's not just you, even though you're guiding that process, values come through in that, right? And that's what we're talking about today. Is your how do you ensure that it doesn't become so cold and clinical that it loses those personal values that you hold, that you be, right? Because that would make your job miserable if you had to eliminate all that.
It would. But we have our vision and mission, but then we also have our company values.
Right.
But then I have my own personal values. Like that's different from what the company's values are.
Yep.
And I think that the values are what like anchor our decisions.
Right.
There's the strategy and execution, but leadership is really anchoring the decisions and the values.
I agree.
And so I think that when you're like really, it takes work, but I think continuing to stay focused on like driving everything back through the values. Does this align with the values?
Right.
then that creates consistency and trust and direction for teams, even in uncertain times.
Right.
So you have that, but you know that we're going to anchor ourselves in what those values are.
Yeah, I would say they're especially valuable in uncertain times. Right. That's why they're there. Right. The most impact they're there for when things are very uncertain, and so you're really struggling trying to figure out how to balance this stuff out. And when you're very prosperous, because that's when you tend to float away from them. When you're just exceeding so far ahead of everything, you start getting people get out over their skis, or as Larry Kerr says, you start out kicking your punt coverage. Right. And but that's when you start doing decisions that are outside of you, right? Either because we're afraid, right, or we're nervous about uncertainty, or because we're overconfident.
And that can really go off on a path that you have to course correct at some point.
Correct. Yeah. Because nature will correct itself. Right. It will at some point. It will snap you back.
Or the finances will, whatever.
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
Something will. Right. But I think like in the oil and gas industry in particular, volatility is a constant. And that, there's policy changes that impact our industry. There's technology that can disrupt the industry in good ways and bad ways. I mean, technology in good ways, but either way causes the volatility, and so those values are what can provide the steady compass.
Right.
And
100% true.
Reactions too.
Yeah. 100% agree.
You just like want to go and get out too far ahead of yourself.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot, right? Especially very successful people, right? I see it. I've been on a lot of executive teams, and on several executive teams, and interact with a lot of executives, and they do. If you're not careful, they're very passionate about what they do, right? About creating the vision. Most of them creating the vision, selling the vision, very passionate about it, and they're focus, their focus time is that, or I don't try not to be rude to any of them here. Their ability to focus on anything for any length of time, right, before they pull off to something else is so limited that it's easy for them to make knee-jerk reactions. Yeah. And when they are separated from their values and separated from their vision, then you start seeing the negative impact of some of that. Right. And you start seeing the increased turnover. You start seeing the company starts drifting a different way because the company's going to go the way the leader goes, good or bad. They're going to follow the head. And as you've gone through the different markets that you've worked in, have your values stayed consistent all the way through?
I think the things that I prioritize and care about has changed over time, for sure. Probably though, the core values that I personally really care about are probably pretty consistent.
Yeah, I think they would have to be.
The things that I think about, that I really care about, are things like I always want to be learning, to be challenging myself. Those things haven't changed.
Right.
So I guess the values haven't really changed. The priorities of them maybe have, but the actual values.
No, and I think they would based off of where you are in life. As you go through, I had lunch yesterday with a guy named Dave Jewett, and he launched 20 plus years ago. He started a year one degree, and in that, you understand what you're passionate about, and then you start trying to focus your decisions and your life based off of those things you're passionate about, and you pull that into what you're doing so that you can stay more focused, energized about it. But he broke out a little chart that he shared with me, and it showed the different. And I had it right here, and I was going to quickly see if I can find it, but it showed in the different stages of life, the things that you were passionate or things that were important to you during that stage. Now, they didn't change right? But the priority and the arrangement of them changed as you went through life. And because the only thing really that will cause them to change would have to be something catastrophic in your life. Right. Something very disruptive that then would make you step back and say, okay, I'm going to give that up and I'm going to pursue here. But I think the things that your grandmother taught you are still the things, that's still the voice you're going to hear in your head. Right. And those are still the things. My grandmother was about 4 foot tall, little Irish lady. And she was, most of her life before my grandfather passed away, she's just meek, mild thing that stayed in the kitchen. You never really seen her. But after he passed away, suddenly she burst out this personality that's so huge, it's crazy.
Oh, wow.
And found out that she was actually very sarcastic, that apparently the first 60 years of her life, she did nothing but mumble that sarcasm under her voice. And then it started coming out. But I can remember everything that she did and everything that she taught me and showed me. And when something pops up, I hear that. Right. And even growing up, we didn't have, of course, raised by a single mom. She raised 4 of us, and we didn't have a lot of rules, right? Mom was not a believer in the thou shalt nots.
Okay.
So even growing up in school, it never had a don't drink, don't do drugs, none of that. What we had was don't do anything that will shame the family. Which was even more encompassing, right? Because it was very subjective. So, but the way I understood it and the way I applied it was huge, right? And even now, as I got married, and Tammy and I, we made an agreement we wouldn't say or do anything when we're apart that we wouldn't do when we're together, and so it makes the decision making very easy, right? So when you say, hey, we want to go over and do this, I won't. Now I'm not going to do that. I have no desire to do that. I'm not going to do that, and you find a lot of people, though, that they're motivated by what they're seeing and feeling and touching right then. And they're not disconnected from the values, because the values are still there, because you can see the battle that's going on. They just learn to override it for some reason.
To fair point. I mean, I think that that probably gets back to like being mindful and intentional,
right?
Because there are like shiny baubles that come along that are easy to distract. And if you're not focused on leading your life with intent, you can get sidetracked.
So you can.
I think it's difficult when you see somebody that you work with and you care about, or in your personal life, family members that you care about, that you see them not, that their priorities need a shift.
Right.
And it's hard to have those difficult conversations. And two, like, what if they don't want to have that difficult conversation?
Right.
You want to on their behalf.
Right. Yeah.
But they don't. That's hard. That's hard too. But
believe me, I have a son in his mid-30s and another one that's almost, actually, I guess, lower 30s. So you have to have those conversations they don't want to have. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think with your team, with your employees, you can hold people accountable through the values, through the association's values. And I know I've had some difficult conversations with team members in that way. I've had a great coach, you probably know him, Dave Warnick.
I do, yeah.
Who over the years has really, he walked me through how to have those conversations with team members. And then since then, now I know how to do it.
Yeah.
But the first time that he kind of talked me through it, I was like, this makes sense, but I cannot really be about to walk in this room and say this to somebody.
Right.
Not like,
Really?
I know.
At least it wasn't.
There we go.
At least it wasn't your computer that died this time.
I know. It's just the light. I'm like hiding from a sensor. So I had somebody on my team that wasn't meeting the association's values.
Right.
And Dave was like, you need to go in and say, this is your behavior and this is your actions and this is how it's not aligning with what
Right.
these values are of the association. And our expectations are not going to change. And so you can either choose to meet those values,
Right.
or happy to help you move on and find something else.
Yeah.
And we can do that in a very open and transparent way.
Yeah. I've had a lot of those conversations.
And that, I think, is I think that a lot of leaders don't always have the respect for their team members
Right.
to do that.
Yeah. And have them early, right? Have the conversation. It has to be timely. There's a good book out called Crucial Conversations. That I love that book, right? And then it goes on. There's a couple other follow-ups, Crucial Conflicts and different ones. But that's what it's about, is having the right conversation at the right time. But I love the word that you use there, because I use that one all the time. You said you didn't choose to do this, right? And I think when I'm having those conversations, especially about values and behavior as it relates to values, it is, right, your choice, right? And this doesn't change, right? But this doesn't change is only effective if your leadership is following that, right? When leadership holds themselves to a different standard than they're holding everyone else, it makes it hard for you to hold them accountable. And I've had conversations with CEOs when they'd come in a plant and they would do something, and I would have to say, hey, you can't do that. While obviously you can, because you're CEO, you can do whatever you want. But if you do that, I can't hold that guy running the machine accountable when he does the same thing, because he saw you do it.
Right.
And when you bring it like that, right, that because, you throw the because in there, it's a very powerful word. People see what the impact of what they're doing is. And it's not just, I just naturally do this. So Vicente Reynal, he was coming through the Fort Worth plant. And at the time, come through the Tulsa plant for Gardner Denver. And we had a no cell phone policy at the time. And we're walking through, and one of the board members calls him. He grabs his phone, and I just said, hey, sorry, Vicente, we're cell phone free. You need to step over into the parking area. And he's like, he immediately shut it down and went over there. He honored that. But I've had some that said, you know what, we'll talk about this later. Well, yeah, but in the meantime, everybody is seeing you do that.
That's right.
Right. And they see there's two separate rules, and it makes it hard to guide the company or the plant or the team through the values because of the inconsistency of it.
Absolutely. You're back to choice again. You're choosing to be in a leadership role, and so you have to. You don't have to, but like, if you want to be a good and effective leader, then you need to recognize that there is a spotlight on you,
right? A huge spotlight,
and it matters what action people see from your team. It makes a big difference. And it's interesting too, working with a lot of different companies. I kind of get, you kind of see like the shadow of leadership being passed throughout the organization. And you see how, like, where there's like, for example, one of our companies has had, a history of like really strong, passionate leaders that like really give the why behind the industry, and you see like how that impacts the entire team, and that the entire team is enthusiastic and cares. Or there's a company that like the leadership is really focused on like being the technical experts, and everybody puts a lot of pride and value on that. And so like, you can't underestimate the impact that the leadership has on every single person within these very large organizations.
Yeah. As the head is, so goes the body, right? And I think that's, for me, I'm passionate about developing your vision and living your vision. because the most powerful skill that a leader has is the ability to tell a story. And their ability to tell a story for me is because you have to cast that vision. You have to sell that vision. You have to make what you're doing about something more than what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And, there has to be meaning behind it because that's what people want, right? Yeah, the meaning is more than I get a paycheck, right? Because honestly, if that's all you're working for, you're going to be very miserable.
Absolutely.
There has to be something in that drives you to do, right? It may just be, I want to get away from the house, right? Something like that. I mean, but there has to be more than just that paycheck. And I know you're fine. You're fine.
I think that when you're in the day to day and you're trying to there's specific things you're really trying to accomplish as an organization, it can be easy to get focused on what we need to do and how we're going to do it,
right?
And skip past the why step.
Yeah.
But you'll get so much better results if you slow down, start with the why.
Yeah. So Simon Sinek, right? That's it. Start with why, and I agree 100% with that. And my big thing, and Tammy, my wife, she was laughing because I was talking to somebody and they said, it's important that you take a second, you pause and you breathe. And she laughed because that's what I tell people all the time. Whatever's happening, pause, step back. And even today, my post, my blog this morning was really about pausing and seeing the patterns and rhythm of chaos because it's there. Right. It's not just random. There are cause and effects within it. Now it may not be that 4/4 rhythm, right, of a waltz, but it may be more of a 3/4 or something like that. But you can find that pattern, and once you find it, you can engage it, and then you can get that energy into it. But as a leader, the more you advance in the leadership roles, the more you should start detaching from the tactical day-to-day, right? Because the tactical day-to-day is very much about what's happening this minute, what's happening in the next hour, what's happening in the next day. And as a COO, as a CEO, yes, your finger's on that pulse, but you're setting your vision for what's happening next year, the year after, how you're getting things arranged and in place and the people that are there, and keep people motivated and excited about it and seeing that so they understand that when I make this decision that for this hour or for this day, how that aligns with where we're headed down the road, right? Yeah. Because if you do the wrong thing, that then just going to have to correct at some point, and that can be expensive.
Sure, but it's balance. Because if you get yourself too far out of the day-to-day.
I clearly said you have to keep your finger on the pulse.
You said it. No, you said it.
Yeah.
You said it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, but it's hard to balance.
It is. No, it's not easy. It's not easy to do, right? If it was easy to do, anybody would be in your role, right? Yeah. But you were specifically created and crafted to be where you are right now. So you have the tool sets, and you've developed them as you've gone, and you have the values that are needed, and you're very good at it, right? A lot of people will agree with that. Mm-hmm. Now you're your own worst critic because you're going to see the things that you struggle with, and and I should have done this and I should have done that, and we all have that George Costanza moment where 3 days afterwards we come up with the answer, but that's just part of life.
Yeah.
But you settle into what you do and trust that you are prepared and doing your role. Mm-hmm. And you're part of a bigger organization, and each piece, as it does its part, it's going to be healthy, it's going to hold, it's going to flourish, it's going to grow. So that's where that balance you're talking about really comes into play, because if you're too far into it, then you undermine the ability of that team to do it because they think you don't trust them. And if you don't trust them, then why don't I just sit back and wait for you to tell me what to do, which is not why you've hired them.
Right.
Right. No. So, yeah, we can have this conversation all day long. I love this conversation, by the way. So when you talk about values-driven leadership, right? And we kind of talked in and out around it all. But what does that really mean in practical terms?
I think that it is and I'm coming back to a term I used earlier, but it is the compass. It drives my personal life, but then also for the organization. And I think that it um, keeps people, when I'm talking about my organization, it's how I keep people knowing what the focus needs to be and what the expectations are. And so, like, practically speaking, one of our values is, ownership and accountability.
Right.
And so the expectation with the team is that we're going to take ownership and accountability over our actions.
Right.
And we're not going to wallow in blame, excuses, and denial.
Yep.
When things happen, we can assess how it happened, why it happened, so that we have that, kind of information. But then we're going to spend our time on how things look when they're fixed and what we want to look like as an organization. And for me, like, everybody on the team knows, and they will also help coach each other on, this is going sideways, whatever it is. And going sideways, and or this did not happen the way that you were supposed to do. And you need to go and you need to own that, and then we can all move on. But I think that it's talked about as a team, and everybody understands that that's the expectation, and so they can help drive it within each other.
I agree 100% with you. Now, for that to happen, you have to have trust among your team, right? Because there has to be a certain level of vulnerability to be able to talk about where things went wrong, and people step up and own it, right? And it's not just all about discipline, right? You can force it and make people do it, but ideally, your values and your culture are going to drive that conversation.
One of the things that can feel like erode trust is when leaders don't hold the team accountable to the things that they say that they will.
Right.
And they're not consistent in that. And if you're not being consistent in how you carry out the values of the organization as you said that they will, that speaks. The things that you don't say as a leader to your team speaks volumes.
Oh yeah. As a journalist major, you'll appreciate the Bard, right? The whole world is but a stage, and we are players thereupon. And I think that's true, right? You said it earlier. Spotlight is on the leader. The higher the level, the brighter the light, and the more people are watching, the more people are going to follow up. Which is why you have to be consistent. Now, earlier though, you made the comment. You said you have your set of values and you have the company set of values, and hopefully they're aligned or they're the same, but more than likely they're going to be close, but not 100% in alignment. So how do you handle your decision making when they're not completely aligned, especially in high pressure areas?
So my values, kind of my core values, are not the same as the organizations, and I think that some of them kind of align, but they're not. None of them are the same.
Right.
And I think that's that all works and makes sense. I think that what I watch for is, are my values continuing to align with the work that I'm doing at the association? And as long as they do, then I think that everything is good and easy. When they don't, that hasn't happened at my current organization right now, clearly, because I'm still here. Right. But it has in the past, And I think when that happens, you have to take a step back and assess, is this misalignment something that's a deal breaker or not? And is it anything that is within your control to change? And if it's a deal breaker and it's nothing that you have control over, then that's a good time to move on and find something else, because the organization's values shouldn't change. So if it's not, or if it's the leadership and the way that they're carrying out the values,
Right.
and their interpretation of them, also organizations' values can change. And so, like, when we looked at our values a couple of years ago and just did kind of an assessment to see, are we still aligned on what they are?
Right.
And we were like, this might be a good time to change it. And did an assessment and it didn't change, but we could have changed it at that time. And I think that values do change for organizations. And I think that some people, cannot see the importance of the values.
Right.
I've definitely heard people talk about that before. And like, well, why does it actually matter? Well, it matters. And like, why are people upset about the values changing? Well, people are upset because it does impact your work life.
Right.
And if you align with the organization or not.
Oh, 100%, right? It's back to that why, right? The underlying value behind what I'm doing and how it's bigger than what I'm doing. Yeah. It kind of rolls into your purpose type thing. So that's kind of a interesting, conversation, especially the way you phrase some of that. And how do you recognize, though, when somebody's truly leading from their values and versus when it's just a slogan for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's clear. I mean, if you're paying attention, I feel like it's pretty clear.
Right.
Because you see if their actions align with the words that they're saying. Because if it's just a slogan for them, then their actions, like, it might happen to align some of the time, but it's not going to all of the time. And are there times that, like, what I do doesn't align with our values? Probably, but I probably also will, like, hold myself accountable to that with my team.
Yeah. And right, you will, and most effective leaders I know they hold themselves to a different standard, a higher standard, and uber critical of ourselves if we're not careful. Right, we're not really good at giving ourselves grace, but we're really good at pointing out our faults and failures.
Absolutely.
I think that as we grow, hopefully we become not just older, but we do become more mature and become wiser. And we begin to start thinking about those different things. And one of the things I remember way back in my 40s, that's when I really started thinking about, that next generation of leaders. And, the whole generational transitions and shifts. And in your role, you have the opportunity to impact a lot of people at different stages in their development, right? With a lot of your programs and the training and stuff that you all do. So how do your values and how do your organization's values, how do they come into play when you are interacting with the next generation of leaders outside your organization and even developing those within, right? Because they're going to bring their own set of values, right?
They are. And I think one of the things that we do as an association is we bring people together, or like within our leadership programs across generations. Right. But we're also having conversations within our companies about what are the desires of the next generations coming into the workforce? How is that different than what's within our current workforce? And any changes or ways that our companies can adjust accordingly. And I think that, a lot of times that those discussions happen within our people and culture committee, but they also happen at the board and advisory board level too. Because certainly what we see is that Gen Z prioritizes transparency.
Right.
And that is not how companies have traditionally operated. And so when we're talking about what the different generations care about, like baby boomers, Gen X, I really like lumping that together. There's a lot around loyalty and hard work and stability. Millennials, of which I'm an elder millennial, value collaboration and growth and impact. And I think that companies can offer, we can offer all those things to all those different generations if we're intentional.
Yeah.
And some of the companies have talked about that they're doing more like bespoke or custom talent development.
Right.
And based on what the different generations care about. And I think that that's pretty cool. One of the things that I think is one of the more impactful things coming out of Gen Z is because they care so much about transparency.
Right.
And understanding their opportunities for career growth. Our companies are going much deeper in succession planning and going like enterprise wide, and they're mapping out ways for employees to build their resume.
Right.
And in doing that by like lateral moves or working on special projects, and like that transparency is a value of Gen Z that matters to them, and companies have to do things differently in order to help them meet those needs.
No, that makes perfect sense. Because I'm huge into the development. I mean, obviously, I better be in my current line of work, right? But but I have been my entire career, right? Even as a kid, that was when we role played, I was always the teacher, and the challenge has been getting that next generation out of the day-to-day mindset into thinking about, not just anybody, into thinking about what my next position is, what the next role is, so they can start making the steps to train themselves and be prepared for that opportunity when it arose. But on the opposite side, it has always been a challenge for for the leadership team really to look back and think about that succession plan as a strategy, right? Instead of I've got this guy, I know this guy, or this lady that she's here, I really like her, so she's going to be my replacement. Well, that may not be the right move, but it's the convenient or the comfortable move. And I think to be more intentional, because that's one of my favorite words as well, to be more intentional about it and map it out and help them understand what they need to do to be ready for it and be prepared for it, which is sometimes not just spending more time in your role, right? There's things you need to learn. There's a way you need to learn how to see certain ways and think certain ways, and then how do you apply it, which means as an executive team or leadership team, we have to open those opportunities for that person to start drifting in and getting introduced to the consequences of those decisions.
Some of the pushback that I have heard from companies when our People and Culture Committee has been discussing this is that our leadership doesn't feel comfortable developing people for them to leave.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very narrow way of looking at things. Like, do you not also see that it might build loyalty with them with it because you're developing them?
Yeah.
Or if you're not developing them, they're going to leave.
No,
anyways.
100% they will. I forget who it was that I remember reading one time. They said that, that what's the risk of developing our team members and then them leaving, and then somebody saying, well, what's the risk of not developing them when they stay?
Oh,
right.
That's a good way of putting it.
But it is. And
Yeah.
my thing has always been, right, let people develop to their potential. If that opportunity is there for them when they're ready, then they'll step into it. And if it's not, and they step out and go somewhere else, well, you're still going to get that benefit, right? That increased value while they're there. And then to the point you just made, that loyalty is seen. And then the rest of the team, as they're seeing that encourages them to step up and take that next step and be ready, because it's not just the company trying to grab everything that they can from the employee. It's actually investing back in the employee themselves. That's what I love about the intern programs that a lot of the companies are doing, right? The older intern programs were pretty much somebody showing up and making copies or getting coffee, right? And now they're actually working on projects, and they're designing and developing, and they're really having impact on the organization, because companies are seeing that as an investment. Well, in the budget process, the first thing that is normally cut after meals and entertainment is the training. And and that begins to get pulled out. So supervisors and managers have to get very creative on how they can continue to develop or train their teams. And if you're not careful, they end up not doing anything because the company's not supporting them doing anything. And it makes it hard. It's hard to build a culture of growth and progress when you're throttling it that way.
It's true. And I think that's why it's a good value proposition of trade associations, that we have, ways to continue to develop your people is just by being part of the association. But that's one of the things that I love about like our leadership programs is that's what I tell people when they get put into one of our year-long programs, is that like you being here and being put into this program is already like a really big, like it's an investment from your company in you. And it's done with intent. This is not done by like this is not remedial leadership where you're being put in because you're not a good leader.
I know.
And that's what I tell the companies is that just the act of you, like if you tell people I'm putting you into this program by design because I see potential in you,
right.
You've already gotten so much out of it, because people come into that program like feeling so much more loyal to their company because they feel like that they're being invested in.
Yeah.
There are companies that will put people into the leadership programs and like not tell them why, right, and not tell them anything. They just like are like, here you go, we want you to go do this.
Yeah, we have to do this, right? Because it's what.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people come in to that program like, I don't understand why I'm here. This is like, I need to have work I need to do.
Yeah.
And it's an entirely different mindset that people come into that program with.
Right. And most of those are people that I've seen that approach it that way are frontline leaders or first-time leaders. Mm-hmm. Because they don't understand that leadership, right? Well, what is the book? What got you here won't get you there.
Yeah, right.
They don't understand that next set of skills is far more important than their current set of skills, and right, you have to learn it. I mean, I went through the year-long program, and it was a great program. I've got some great connections still from that, but the most value I found out of it or found in it was in the coaching and mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as a society, we suck at mentoring and coaching to begin with, and or not. That's the wrong word. We struggle with it, and as an industry in oil and gas or energy, it's even worse, right? Because it is so cyclical and things shift and move around so much. And when the market's up, everybody's just running head first, trying to capture as much as they can. And then when it has that cliff drop, everybody is really just trying to recover and trying to preserve as much as you can, so you can be ready for that next increase. And we don't think about that type of investment into the next generation. And I mean, I struggled for a lot of years just trying to find a good mentor in the industry. And now I have some relationships I've developed that became mentoring relationships, but no one who felt that they really had the time or even the wisdom to give into it, which is 100% not true, because it's not a full-time job, right? It's really just being that ear and helping people understand and how to transition through. So that's one thing I wish that an association like yours would at some point would really take up is helping to drive the importance of a thriving mentoring environment.
Yeah, no, the mentorship is really important. And I think too, not on the mentorship, but just on all of this, when you're talking about energy services,
right,
companies, that mentorship programs and having a strong values culture is really important, because we're talking about like a culture that drives safety.
Yep.
And if you're building trust, you're building, reliability. These aren't abstract things. It can feel like, when we're talking about values, it can feel abstract, but it's not. It's daily decisions with real consequences.
Oh yeah, very tangible.
And it's what's about keeping people safe.
Yeah. You guys are huge at helping with the whole networking connection and the next generation, which rolls into the recruitment processes and how you do how people approach onboarding and career development. How can organizations be more effective at weaving their values into that whole process?
I mean, I think it starts with like leading with what your values are in the interview process, and then even into onboarding, and then I know some companies do weekly team meeting, going back, like talking about one of the values, and so that it doesn't become something that is just mentioned as you are looking at joining the organization and joining on, but then you're seeing how it actually gets lived, and keeping that at the forefront. And so back to intent, like it has to be purposeful and carried out with intent.
What advice would you give that leader or that person that says, hey, I see them written on the wall, but I don't see them lived out. I don't see that daily. What would you suggest that they do to start driving that?
I mean, I think I would read the book, Crucial Conversations, that you mentioned earlier. It is a great guide for a difficult conversation about like coming in and sharing your intent, about like what you're perceiving, and being curious and asking questions about like, this is my perception, but being open to maybe your perception is right, but maybe there's more to it than what you're assuming.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to be open to having a difficult conversation, having courage, and then being open to hearing what the other person is saying.
Yeah. And I think that's what happens a lot of times. We know what we mean when we write our values and when we write our purpose and our mission, but the way it reads sometimes doesn't match what we really meant by it. So we try to apply it the way we mean it, which comes out then looking like it's disconnected when the reality is it's not. Right.
Yeah,
we just need to be less worried about making it look pretty on a wall and more impactful.
Because values-driven leadership isn't about perfection.
Correct.
None of the leadership and principles are about perfection. It's about consistency, and when it comes to values, it's about alignment.
Yeah. And which pulls into, you went into it earlier, right? The transparency and the vulnerability and all of that.
Well, that's why tools like 360 assessments are important. But then for the organization, the equivalent, the engagement surveys are equally important. Because you are doing what you think is best and what you think is right, but it doesn't always translating the way that you think it is. But you won't know that if you're not checking in. I think that when I look back on my management career thus far, the only things that I regret are the times when I listened to what somebody else was telling me I needed to do, and it didn't align with how I felt was right. But again, here we are in the 40s. I've learned it.
Yeah, right. But the only way the people in the 20s and 30s are going to learn it without having to go through it is by you helping them to hear it. And we don't talk about for the most part, we don't talk about our failures and the lessons we learned. We talk about, we glory in the successes, right? The 45-year-old that's still living his high school football career, right? All he talks about is that game-winning catch. He doesn't talk about the other 14 games they lost that season. And I think that as leaders, the more we go, we start believing our own press, and we start listening to ourselves, and we're so afraid that people won't buy into us if we actually share those failures. That's one thing I always admired about Larry Kerr, right? From the beginning of my relationship with him, he wasn't afraid to share the struggles as much as he was the successes. And if he didn't know, he didn't pretend that he knew. He would come and he'd say, hey, look, this is what we're trying to work on, and I don't really know how to make this next step. And he understood the value of pulling that team together, which meant somebody had to say, we're all smarter than any one of us are smart, right? And we can all see better than any one of us can see. And I think as people, when we get in your 40s and 50s, you start seeing that. And but it's careful then to stay true to yourself and understand who you are and what you bring to the table, and not let somebody else dictate that for you. So the energy industry is very, I'm going to say it's unique because I've worked in multiple industries, but and they're all cyclical in a certain way, but nothing like the energy industry, right? And the diversity in the industry is insane, right? You see the makeup of the teams in Odessa, Texas versus Shreveport, Louisiana, right? And you, while people are people and there's certain things drive them, we are a product of our culture and our environment. So the values then across the organization have to be applied equally, but how do the organizations within in the energy industry, how do they maintain consistency across the complexity of their widespread organizations, especially with all the acquisitions and stuff, right? It's always something fun.
We have a lot of global companies that are working in many, many countries around the world.
Right.
And those companies have the core values that are applied globally, but then they are lived out and there's nuances to them locally.
Right.
Because you need to honor the culture of where you are, and honor the fact that it is different based on where you are in the world.
True.
And not try to be so prescriptive that it doesn't land, and you're being tone deaf to where you're at.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what our companies do, and they're good about sharing best practices with each other when there's specific things that come up, workforce related, that are happening internationally or whatever, and they will talk about how they are addressing it. And so I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about working for a trade association, is that you are bringing competitors together and they are competing for the same business, that they can see big enough picture that there is value in sharing best practices so that they can all make each other better.
Right. And you guys are really good at that, right? You facilitate those conversations in a way that is pretty incredible to watch. Right. So I've seen people that we were in competition with. I mean, and it was almost at each other's throat competition. And yet we would go into the different sessions with you all, with your team, and we were collaborative partners. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you all having that culture and that relationship with the different organizations, that it can rise to something that is industry driven and not necessarily bottom line company driven, because we all benefit bottom line if we do that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of leadership advice about values, what would it be?
I think it would be to be confident in what you know is true. I think in earlier ages, I had a lot of and self-doubt around, like, I feel this to be true, but I would listen to external sources.
Right.
And I think that's hard to do without experience and living it. But I think that you ultimately know what's right for yourself. And I do see younger people in our office. I feel like that they are probably better at listening to themselves than I was.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you are, of course, you're one of the older millennials, so you were really at the forefront of the whole technology explosion, right? My generation, as an Xer, I remember life pre-internet, pre-computer. I remember companies, we were managing, millions of dollars worth of inventory on little 3x5 manila cards. And,
that's wild.
I know, right? And had a 99% accuracy. That's because you weren't moving so fast that you were making a lot of mistakes on data entry. Your generation came along, and you were, I think you guys were probably the first generation that you started getting introduced to computers in kindergarten, and then started, it all came about technology. Then you have the current generation that, they work at a technology level that is just mind-blowing, how quickly they pick it up and go with it and move with it. And if we're not careful, then we got, folks like me and you, we get stuck in our way of doing it, and we don't understand that, there's things they're going to learn faster than we ever learned them.
Right.
And we can't slow them down to our pace, and that's hard to create an environment then that allows people to work at their own pace and their own speed, understanding that they will sacrifice accuracy for speed.
Yeah, right. No, it's true. But that's why I think you have to focus on the outcomes and not the method
Yeah.
with which to get there.
No, I agree. So Larry and I, we were talking about, he was talking about a company he worked at when he was younger, and he actually put a self-direct team in place. And I thought it was funny because I did the same thing when I worked for F.W. Murphy. And but mine, the team, after I left the company, it didn't last very long. They went back to a traditional form of management. And so I asked him, I said, how long did it last after you left? And he said they immediately began dismantling it. Because it wasn't comfortable for them. Even though it was effective, it wasn't comfortable. And I think even if we could go back and talk to our younger selves, I'm not sure if we would listen to ourselves, because it would be uncomfortable for us, right? Okay, so as a leader, because you are a tremendous leader. Not just in the industry and at your organization, within your family as well. If you had one value that you were going to be remembered by, what would it be?
The thing I would most want to be remembered by out of all the like values that are out there is service driven.
Right.
And I think that is how I lead as a servant leader, but also why I lead, that I've always cared about and really stayed true to having meaningful work.
Right. That makes sense.
I encourage, everybody to actually, I think that if you asked people, what are your values?
Right.
It takes people a minute to think about it. They would say, oh, yeah, I know what they are. But I think that it is a worthwhile exercise to take the time to sit down to actually think about what are your top 5 or 6 values. And I don't know how many people have taken the time or understand the value of doing that.
No, that's true. And write them down. That's the key, I think, because you can sit and talk about them, but once you start writing them down, they become real, and then you start then you start challenging them, and same as your personal mission and your personal vision for yourself.
The values, if you write them down, take the time to write them down, you hold yourself more accountable to it, I think.
Yeah.
And holding yourself accountable to making sure that the decisions that you're making in life and in your career stay aligned with that, and that's the foundation of how you make your decisions.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So my last thing I was going to ask you really was about if you could challenge the leaders listening today in regard to living and leading by their values, what would that challenge be?
I think that the challenge around values-driven leadership is creating consistency and building trust that way, even through uncertain times. The challenge to be aware of not only what you say and do, but also what you don't say.
Right.
And how that impacts how you carry out your values with your team.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I have really enjoyed having you on the show today. It has been just, I think, a great conversation. But has there been anything that you wanted to go into that we didn't go into? Any final parting thoughts that you would like to share?
I don't think so. I mean, I very much enjoyed the conversation also. And I appreciate what you're doing, and you're allowing me to pick a theme and one that aligned with you and what you care about. That's awesome.
No, I appreciate your openness to it and your willingness. So I do thank you for that. All right, what an inspiring conversation with Molly today on the power of values-driven leadership. For her journey through communications, workforce development, and now leading as president of the Energy Workforce and Technology Council, Molly has shown us that leadership rooted in values is not only practical, it's transformative. If you took away something valuable from today's episode, I encourage you to share it with a fellow leader and keep the conversation going. You can learn more about Molly's work through the Energy Workforce and Technology Council. You can connect with her on LinkedIn. And you can always connect with me at michaelsirmon.com for resources on coaching and past episodes. So thank you for listening. And remember, lead well, live whole.
Thanks for joining us on Lead Well, Live Whole. If this added value to your journey, share it with a friend and subscribe. Until next time, lead those you serve well and live your life whole.